Right, we're live. So I've not had a chance to sort this out offline, so we shall have to do it live. We're doing it live. So this is the couch that we've been working on. And in the last couple of streams, we were looking at how we can use subdivision surface modifiers to shape or will give us a high detailed or high resolution version of a very simple mesh. Let's just, so this takes us back to a very basic object. So this is the original shape that the subdivision is assigned to. And this, for the purposes of what we need, is too low resolution, doesn't have enough detail to be useful as a game object. We could use this, but we lose a lot of shape on this curvature, which we want to try and keep. So we've had to look at ways of utilizing the subdivision surface modifier in a way that we can create a game object that maintains much of this curvature. So what we did was basically duplicated the high res and essentially kept it in this resolution. So this was a multiplier of 2, so it's twice as, well, it's not twice as detailed, it's, so from our base, so the way that subdivision works, so this is our base object. So we can see the structure of the mesh. And what subdivision does is literally that. It subdivides the mesh. So if we up that one, take a look, we can see that we've now got twice the divisions or subdivisions of our mesh. So every time we go up a level, we subdivide the structure as we're seeing it. So what we did was basically duplicated this. It was a level 2, I think, as well. So we left it at level 2, applied the modifier to a duplicate, which we then used as the basis for our game object by selectively deleting or removing specific edge loops that allowed us to maintain the shape or silhouette. Let's go into top view. Maintain the silhouette, so that's the outline, essentially the outside shape of our object, but with a reduced, compared to the original, density. So we're reducing the mesh's structure, the mesh density, but we're doing that selectively so that we maintain this shape. So that's what we did in the previous videos. So we did that to the partial arm and the arm and the back. So now we need to do that to, same process, to the seat, wherever that is. There it is, seat. So that's too low resolution. So if we enable subdivisions, and that's what we need. That's what we need, that curvature. All these rounded edges. And we need to keep this curvature here, this shape. So we'll do the same process. Let's just, so we can better see the structure of what we're working with. So we're going to disable optimal display. So this will show what the subdivision is actually doing to the mesh in terms of the structure. So we can see that there's quite a dense mesh. So again, select, duplicate, duplicate objects, press escape just to release that, move that to one side, yoink, over there. And then properties, we're going to apply this modifier. So we want the more options, apply, and this will fix this in place. So when we go back to this, we have the mesh essentially fixed. So what we need to do now is reduce the structure of the mesh in a way that complements the low resolution of the armrest and the seat backs. So what that basically means is that if we look at the structure of the mesh, so we're looking at the structure of the armrest in this instance, we can see that this has a edge loop distribution like this. So what we want to do ideally is try and replicate that on the seat by using the corresponding edge loops. So that's probably going to be that one around our seat. So in this particular orientation, we might be able to get rid of all of these. And because this is a hidden surface or hidden edge or structure, we might be able to be quite aggressive with this because we can't see any of this when the mesh is being used in game. But we might be able to even negate that further by heavier optimization, joining the meshes together. But we'll see how this goes. Similarly, although this is going to be a little trickier, if we look at the structure of the armrest, is much more, well, it's much less dense than the seat because we've got all of this area that's just defined by this edge selection. So we want to keep this, but then we can possibly be quite aggressive with all of these. And this and these possibly at the bottom down here. So let's try that and see what happens. So select, edit mode. So Alt click selects the edge loop, or alternatively select an edge either via vertices or using edge select. Selecting an edge, and then we can go select loops, edge loop, and it'll do it for us. So select loops, edge loop. Then get rid of that. So that is mesh, delete, or X, and then we want to dissolve edges. So X, dissolve edge. And as we do this, we should see that the structure of the seat roughly matches or approximately matches the armrest. And that's what we're trying to do. So get rid of that, that one, and that one. So let's just hide the high res for the moment because it's blocking the view of the scene. So it's that one, I think, yeah, and high seat. So we need to rename this whilst we're here. Let's call that low. So let's double click. Dissolve. So we'll come back to that. what we can also do here, exit edit mode, tab, select the armrest, shift click the seat, tab, so we're tabbing both meshes into edit mode, because what we can do here is N key for properties, and it's not going to let us do it. This is one disadvantage of editing multiple meshes in edit mode, is that it doesn't always give us measurement information for our selections on the secondary mesh that's selected. So the armrest is actually, it's not the active object, the seat is. But we might be able to still undo 3.7. Okay, so we're going to have to do this manually. So edge slide, double tap G, get these to match up approximately. You don't necessarily need to do this, but it can help with maintaining our view of what we're doing. And at the front here, we might be able to get away with getting rid of that one. Double tap G. So now we need to tackle this section. So we can get rid of that one. That one. That one. And when you're doing this, when you're removing edge loops, it's best to remove intermediate or in between edge loops so that you don't affect the structure of the mesh too much, too aggressively, and lose the shape of what you're trying to optimize. And that way we can find that it's easier to then go back to, say, this edge loop and just delete this and roughly maintain the structure of our mesh. So we're trying to be aggressive with the optimization, but we're doing it in a way that's not necessarily going to aggressively affect the mesh as we are working on it. So let's keep that one for now. So undo. What about this corner? I'll come back to that. So we need this edge loop. So let's try removing that. Dissolve, intermediate. But we want to maintain this slight curvature. So let's try that one and that one. That looks okay. So now, so basically don't be afraid to do things in passes or phases. So we are being relatively aggressive with the removals of the edge loops that are obvious that can be removed, and then if we need to, we can go back over the mesh and reduce it even more. So we don't necessarily need to be trying to get the structure that we want from the get-go, because that can inadvertently make more work for ourselves, which we want to really try and avoid. So we might, I think we might need to keep that one. Let's try getting rid of this one. X, dissolve. That looks okay. That looks okay. Right, get rid of that one or that one. But what we want to do here is selectively remove these. Oops. So shift click. And we can remove this one around the back because it's not going to be seen. So shift, not shift, X, dissolve. That's okay. Let's just hide the seat for the moment, or the back of it. So which one's that? Hang on. So edit mode. That's that one. Let's double click, rename this low. Hide that. We can be a bit more aggressive here. So get rid of that one. And we can get rid of this corner. That's going to create a triangle, but that's fine in this context. Let's try getting rid of that one. So this is us now being more aggressive. With our shaping. Because we want to try and, again, replicate the structure of the existing meshes, and remembering that this will eventually use a normal map. So all the curvatures, all the curves, those will be emphasized by the presence of a normal map. So that looks okay. So tap out of edit mode. Where's the seat? There's the seat. Enable. So what have we got so far? We're still relatively high res, so if we duplicate this or mirror it, so we're going to mirror all the bits. Turn the mirror modifier on. We should find, let's hide the sidebar. What's our that's quite high. So, so we might have to be even more aggressive. Although that's going to be a little tricky. Let's just save this actually. File, save increment. So we have a restore point, right? So okay, so we're going to join the arm to the seat. So we'll just select those, shift click, and then object join. Then we need to remove this seam. So just select everything, mesh, clean up, merge by distance. And that should, where's the notification? Oh, it's in the status bar, but we can't see it because we're in a squished format. So, but we can test that by selecting that loop, and it should select all the, oh, it should select the entire edge, which it does, so that's okay. All right, so we need to be more aggressive with our optimization, because that is a lot. 3,500. So what we might, so what's going to work here? So our issue is we want to try and keep this curvature, but we need to reduce some of these. So maybe taking out these edge loops, and as this is not animated, maybe we can take out a lot more of the edge loops on the seat, because that's a relatively flat surface, so we don't need to worry about maintaining a, hang on, let's just hide the, we don't need to worry about maintaining where's the other low gone? Seat low, back low, where's the armrest low gone? Oh, we joined it, didn't we? Duh. So what is this? Bag. Just rename that to make it clearer what's just happened, because we just joined those. Right, so select, edit mode, X, dissolve, X, dissolve, X, dissolve. Let's try these two, X, dissolve, X, dissolve. If the loop doesn't necessarily describe an obvious shape or form, so there's no noticeable curve on this edge, so we can remove that. Same with this one, we can remove that because the curvature is essentially defined by this midpoint. So that's going to be trickier. Let's try removing this. That's okay. And this. So again, we're removing corresponding edge loops. So keeping this flow. Dissolve. This is going to be tricky, so let's try doing this one. So that's Alt click to select one edge loop, and then Shift Alt click to select another to be part of that same selection. So delete, dissolve, that's okay. So that's 1,300, so that's going to be what? Oh wow, we've lost quite a lot. So let's keep going. So we want to keep this curvature because otherwise it looks too faceted, and that faceting is noticeable. So can we remove one of these? or that. Let's get rid of that one. Might be able to get rid of this one. That's okay. So the back, oh, we've got one of those wrapping loops here because of the structure of the mesh. Let's go to that one first. Let's try removing that. Make an adjustment. So edge slide, oops. So what have we got? 920. So our total is 2200 or 2300. Right, so let's save this. Now, this is where it's going to get interesting, because what we can do now, let's just hide that for the moment, because what we're going to do, going to do some aggressive, so we're going to go into face select, select all of these surfaces, this corner, the back, and this bottom edge, because we can remove this because it's not visible. We can't see it. So what we can do, actually we might be able to, yeah, no, that's okay. Because what we can do now is join everything together and then physically remove the bits that we cannot see, because that's essentially wasted mesh structure. So we can remove this bottom set of faces, because what we can do is either bridge across the gap or merge the vertices together, and that just unifies that shape or that structure, which means that we never really needed to have these surfaces visible in the first place. So let's delete those. X. Hang on, let's enable that or disable that. So we're going to get rid of these. X. Faces. So that has pushed us down to 2150. So We can do the same thing. And this is why we want to try and not necessarily replicate the structure of the mesh, but we want to try and follow through or have corresponding edges wrapped around our object, because although it's a little high at the moment, what we can do is, in the same way that we've just deleted, let's hide that, all these surfaces that were invisible, well, they're not invisible, they won't be seen in game, so it's wasteful to have them in the mesh. In the same way that we've done that to the seat, if we do that to the armrest, we can remove all the surfaces below this line or this edge loop, because they too are not going to be seen, which is another optimization that we can do. And then we join everything together and we have a closed mesh, but much more heavily optimized. So let's get rid of those. But it means that as we have corresponding mesh structure, it makes this process of optimization easier, because the different meshes, even though they are different mesh objects, they're completely independent of one another. At the point we join them together, we have a correspondence that makes everything easier to do, easy to work with. So when you're working with your low res meshes, so let's just armrest high, back high, select, just reduce that. So when you are working with your high res, you want to keep this edge flow in mind across completely separate objects, because it then makes any subsequent processes that you have to do easier, especially if it's a game object. So hide the seat. Let's, whoops. Yeah, that's okay, that's hidden. Tab, make sure we're in face select. And we obviously don't want to do a loop select on this, because it'll select the entire structure. So we just want to be selective. With those selections into the corner, because again, this is a gap that we can bridge. That looks about right. So delete those, X, delete faces. So we've now got a big gap, but our triangle count has dropped down to 854. So mirrored, that's what, 1600, 1700. That's okay. So now seat low, you need to do a little adjustment to this. So I want the edge loop. That's going to select around our loop, not our loop, our mesh. So paint select, C key, middle click, deselect those. So we can we do a double edge slide? No, we can only go upwards. So pull this down. vertex select, double tap, edge slide or vertex slide. So what we can do now, face select, hide. Right, so we might be able to get rid of these edges as well before physically joining everything together. But we might want to keep this V down the front of the couch or seat. But to do that, we'll have to add an extra, well, a little bit more structure here. We don't necessarily need to do a full edge loop around the entire object because it doesn't define a shape. It's just going to be something that's specific to this area so that we can connect the two bits together. So let's unhide that. That's Alt H. It's weird, why isn't that working? Hide unselected. No, that's not right. Mesh. Reveal hidden. Loop select. H to hide. Alt H to reveal. Okay. So let's go inside the mesh. Right, yes, so we can get rid of this edge loop because we can join those vertices. So seat, edit, edge loop select. But we don't want to go all the way around the front, we just want to stop. There, that's okay. So delete X faces. Now for this next bit, we're still using two objects. And of course we can't, well, we can edit across multiple objects. So for example, we could select vertices from two, so remember these are two separate objects. Hang on, let's just double check. Yep. So these are two separate objects. What we can do here is merge at center, but it won't do anything because these are two separate objects. So what we can do, select our vertices and then use Shift S, selection to active. Let's just undo that. It'll snap the selected objects together from the last, which is basically the first that you select, to the last element that you select, which becomes the active object in the selection group. So if we selected multiple vertices, the last one that's selected, so let's go with that one, would be the active object or the active element that everything is being snapped to. So you need to remember your selection order when you use this so that you are selecting and snapping to the correct element and then forming the correct shape that you want, because obviously select, so let's just do it actually. So let's go Shift S. So what we're doing is snapping the back of the seat to the back of the chair rest, or the arm. If we did it the other way around, so we select the seat first, and then the seat node, we're selecting those in a different order, or reverse order. So this is now the active object. So when we snap together, the back of the seat moves to, well, not the back of the seat, the back of the chair moves to the back of the seat, the vertex that we had selected. So pay attention to your selection order when you're using this. Let's just undo that because we want it the other way around. Select active. So we've got an extra vertex here that we need to deal with later. So let's snap that to that, that to that. And then when these two objects are joined into one single object, we can come back to this and fill this with a, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this will be an n-gon, but we can fill that gap. That one to that one. That one to that one. And again, this is why we want to try and keep our mesh structure relatively uniform across objects. So that one, no, reverse the selection order, that one first, that one. So we've got an extra loop there as well that we need to accommodate. So that one to that one. Whoops, undo. That one to that one. That one to the corner. That one to, wrong way around, that one to that one. So we might be able to get away with just filling this gap, or because this again, so again we're dealing with optimization. So this is a structure. So there is a structure here. It's an indentation, but because this seat, well, because this section isn't necessarily going to be seen, it's not going to be visible, we don't necessarily need these extra surfaces. So here we could just remove these. So let's do it. And then bridge across the gap, but again, remembering that we are dealing with two completely separate objects, so we can't do a proper bridge here, but we can get, well, when we join the objects together, we can then bridge this gap and fill that. So we are, instead of having twice the vertices, twice the faces, because we want to accommodate that indentation, we just have a single face that goes across the gap. But that's okay. Same at the back of the seat. So what we can do here then, we've got the basic optimization in place. We can join these. So edit mode, tab, select, make sure that you don't necessarily need to do this, but it's useful. Want to try and maintain the same origin point for all the objects. So they all use the same origin location. So we can set that in different ways. You can either set it to center of mass, origin to geometry, all the other bits and pieces. But generally speaking, a better way to do it in this particular instance, because we want everything to be not only using the same origin, but we want all the coordinates and measurements to be the same, or not the same. They need to be relative to the same point in space, which is the origin. And this is why it's useful to maintain your origin point across all your objects. So in this case, what we did was just used the 3D cursor, which is there. 0, 0, 0. Where's it gone? Oh, that's right. So we did that when the objects were centered on the grid, because obviously that was with the original high-res mesh. And then once you've positioned your cursor, then you can object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Right, so let's join these. Actually, before we do, another version, save increment. Right, join, so object, join. So we've now gone from, what was it, 5,000 down to 1,900 or 2,000. But what we can do now, edit mode, and this is where we can do our other bits of optimization. So edge select, shift click those two edges, and then fill. So that's the F key, or new edge face from vertices, which is a weird place to do it because it's a face that we're creating, but F. I've got a couple of other loops we need to accommodate, but this is going to give us our first phase of joined optimization. Let's just hide the mirroring. Because we can go back to that corner that we had. Edge select. Now we have joined these at the object level, but we haven't merged them. So we'll be able to select multiple edges across both objects, but we won't necessarily get the type of surface structure that we might want to place across objects because they are still detached. In other words, if we select this edge, press the G key, we can see that only one section of the mesh is moving. So this creates, we need to be mindful of this, because if we select this edge as part of the group selection to place a new face in here, we create an odd shape because, undo, because there isn't a connection. So we need to make sure that we are selecting the surfaces or edges or vertices on one surface or object. Doing that, that closes that gap. Where was the other one? I think that was it. So we filled that one. Might be able to do a bit more optimization down here as well, but we'll leave that for now. And we've got a bit of an awkward shape here, so there's potential optimization going on here as well, and up here. So going to need to do a bit more work on this. So we'll leave that for another stream. But we can see how, what's our edit, exit mode, mirror, select, 2000, that's not too bad. That's pretty good actually. So we'll leave it here for now and come back to doing a bit more optimization, because again we've got a bit more structure here that we can optimize. We don't necessarily need to, but it does help to get into the habit of removing structure that isn't necessary because it's not going to be seen. So for example, this edge loop isn't going to be seen, so we can tidy this up because it's got structure in here that isn't useful, doesn't do anything. So we'll come back to that. Right, so that's your lot for today. So that's what we've got so far. And then once we've done all of this, got everything connected together, we can talk about UV maps and textures before we then do some baking, texture baking. Right, so we'll call it quits there. Thanks for lurking, lurkers. Did we save this? Save. And we shall see you on the next live stream. Yoink.